Right, I'm reading our chat function and it's got going very well. I wonder if someone would like to volunteer to kick off and ask a question to one of our panel. Otherwise, I will. Is there anybody out there? Okay, well, I haven't heard from anybody. I'll kick off and then I might take a few things from the chat and see if anybody else wants to put a question. So I think someone's put a question on our chat. It might have been Hannah. That if we were going to start again, Hannah Smart, it might have been, if we were going to start again on our high streets, where would we start if we were going to start again? What would the balance be between different land uses, and who would be leading that? And what would local authorities' role be in that? And I might put that to Steve to begin with.
Thanks, Leo. Well, where would we start from? Well, we probably wouldn't start from here. It's that classic joke, but I think the issue that we've had for years is that a lot of our towns, clone towns, zombie towns, have been dominated by the brands. And as the brands now, research show that kind of 10, 15 years ago, the brands needed 250 to 300 stores to reach their catchment. Now, in this day and age with online, they only need 40 and 50. So they're going to concentrate in the larger centres and the hotspots, really. And it's the smaller, medium-sized ranking towns that are the ones that are struggling. It's your Nuneatons, it's your Corby's, it's your Rugby's, it's those kind of towns where the issues are, because the brands that once anchored them are leaving and leaving big gaps behind in the high street. But actually, I think that there's opportunities there, and we've talked about it in terms of bringing in the smaller independent retailers. It's a return almost, and we're seeing it now with the kind of local shopping in the community, the return of the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the return of community-based offers, independent stores, and those that offer a customer service. I think we're going to see that trend, and we've seen it to a degree as well with the market stores and the specialist traders. So it's about allowing those younger stores to flourish and to take the larger format stores in the future. That's how, at the end of the day, M&S and Tesco started out, and others of the big brands. So for the local authorities, it's about how you manage and curate that. So planning is very important. There are archaic planning laws around and policies around frontages and primary shopping areas that we need to look at and revisit, maybe looking more at zones and just ensuring that the mix and diversity that you get in town centres is generating footfall and trips, because you can get education, healthcare and others will generate footfall into our town centres. And I've always said as well that when I visit local authorities and you get out the station and you have to get in a taxi to travel 2 or 3 miles out of centre to visit their offices, if just some of those local authorities could relocate back into town centres, it would make a huge difference for some of those medium-sized towns and smaller centres that are really struggling to generate footfall. And that's what it's about. It's getting people back into town centres. And local authorities are at the forefront of that. They need to take control. And as I said in my presentation, others said as well, not just as planning authorities, but also as deliverers and funders, because the key thing, as I ended my presentation with, it's about money. Where's the money going to come from?
Thanks, Steve. Does anybody, can someone from our panel...
Can I come in, Leo?
Yes, please. David, is that you, David?
It seems to me that we've been too obsessed with retail. And if you take somewhere like, say, Oxford, we knocked down whole areas of shops to build a whole area of houses to build a shopping centre. I think we need to think about rebalancing the towns and not just being obsessed with the retail element and getting people to drive into them, but see them as more organic places for a whole variety of functions.
Thank you, David. Neil?
Yeah, I think there's a kind of further point which is going to come up about, I don't think we can expect our local authorities and our civic leaders to do everything. I think there's got to be a partnership, and they're difficult to form, of the community, whatever that is, and also businesses. And I think there has to be that agreement on what you're trying to do in a place. And I think that we can't expect the local authorities to do everything. They may well, in the immediate future, have most money or the bravest money, but I think we can't expect them to do everything. And I think we've got to help them produce the kind of places that we want as a local community, and we've got to bring business along with that too. And you've seen the likes of Legal and General talking about low capital. Well, now is the exact time for them to come together with communities and with local authorities to actually begin to build these places. And then there's this further issue, which one of the speakers brought up about, is that clearly you need not only action, to my point, but you also need the vision as well. You need to know what you're doing.
Thanks, Neil. Mark, can I come to you?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. I find myself going between two extremes. On the one hand, you absolutely need some form of control. You know, as I mentioned earlier, the problem with the high street is the way it's broken up into so many different elements, and so trying to do anything collectively is really difficult because everyone's got a different angle. I'm a local owner as opposed to someone who owns and manages a portfolio of properties. At the same time, what we are seeing is, as many of the speakers are saying, is originality and authenticity is becoming the thing that everyone's interested in. And funds like Aviva, you know, are starting to look at ethical funding, cause-related funding. You know, they're wanting their money to come through all the way before you lend the money, and then as long as you get a return, and that's changing. So on the one hand, you're seeing some really big ideas around, say, UN sustainability goals and how they're applied, cause-related funding. So if you can create a high street where there's a cause, an idea, a vision, as Neil describes, but to do that, you've got to start joining everything up. The money that's invested in public realm, the highways, the shops. And so I think that you can talk all day about individual ideas, but until you can find some sort of collective structural way of holding this together so that you get ownership, I think that's going to be the big problem for high streets.
Great. Could we have a question from someone, please?
Can I make a comment, Leo?
Go for it. Say who you are, where you're from, and what your question is.
Colin Muncie, private consultant on the committee of the Urban Design Group. My feeling is that we do need some kind of control, and I think that what we're doing is we should be looking at something like maybe the agencies when they were doing the urban regeneration in the past, and have basically a development agency. Because as I see it, we do projects and then we lose the expertise. It dissipates after we've done the master plan or something like that. It all goes away and the momentum's lost and the expertise gets carried on by somebody else who doesn't necessarily understand the momentum that may have been developed in a community. I feel also that we tend to develop our ideas along corporate lines. And I think that what's happened is we've lost our retail diversity, just like the natural diversity, like the ecology. We've lost that ability for small entrepreneurs to start off. You know, you need 20 grand gratuity, you need 20 grand business rate and 20 grand rent before you can even start off in the cheapest situation. And I think that what's happened is we totally overlooked the idea of like street markets and the lesser significant traders. And when you look at the commercial studies done by people like GVA Grimley and loads of others, I've looked at 3 or 4 recently, and very few of them give any significance. They've got a term, is it SRZ or special retail zones or something like that? I forgot what the term they use. And that's they get about 1 sentence mention of that lower echelon in the retail diversity area. And my feeling is that what's happened is in doing that, we've lost the influence. Can I have a shot on the screen, Leo? I'll just show you. If you look at, say, like in Bangkok, you can get some streets. Can you turn onto my screen, Leo?
I'm not able to do that. I'm just the face of this. I'm not running anything in the background, I'm afraid. Maybe somebody else might be able to from our team.
Let's see if I can do it.
Colin, can I help you with that? Oh, you've got it. Super.
Is that it? So, for instance, in say in Bangkok, for instance, because the regulations have been relaxed, and there's a little bit of discretion that can be exercised. An area like that in Yarra, in Chinatown, in Bangkok, suddenly can go from, say, something like this, yeah, a little bit more active, same location, you can see the signs there, to this. And it almost involves no effort whatsoever to that. I'll just draw it out. If you look, it's exactly the same location, but at night time, yeah?
We've just got a slither. I've certainly only got a slither of image on there, Colin.
Okay.
I don't know what anybody else. I don't know what anybody
Right.
else is. Colin, I'm conscious of time. We're at quarter past now, so let's come back to this in an informal discussion, if that's okay. I take a question from somebody else, or a point from somebody else who's on our webinar. I've got lots of people who are very happy to put something on the chat, but maybe you could put a question or pose a question to our panel, our STEAM panel, or make a point yourself.
Leo, can I come in, please? It's Rhiannon here.
Hi, Rhiannon. Yeah, please.
Discuss. So, just first of all, to thank everybody for their presentations, and to just, I suppose, introduce myself. I'm a psychologist and a specialist in public mental health, with a particular focus on environment and how environment can support mental health and well-being. There's many things to say in relation to what's been talked about, but what really struck me was David's presentation and how he emphasised that throughout history there's been change, and that we've got to expect change, and it's coming more rapidly now than it ever has before, for various reasons. But the reason I think this is important is because it seems to me that we're currently looking at this change that we're seeing now as a threat and not an opportunity. And I think that's a really important way of facing this kind of situation. And high streets seem to play a particular role in addressing probably one of the most important global challenges that we face, which is inequalities. And so whenever we think about our places, we need to think about how they function to support everybody, and how they do that in a context-specific way. So, and as part of that, probably one of the most important things we can do is to involve the communities in the discussion around how they see a place developing in a way that will support their well-being and the well-being of the community around the place. And I noticed that in lots of talks, two at least, I think, people were talking about, for example, diversify or die, involve or die, act or die was coming up a lot. And for me, when you think about this really important potential opportunity to address this challenge of inequality in our living environments, then it's got to be involve or die. The others will follow from that. Thanks.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Does any of our panel or anybody else on the webinar want to come back on those points from Rhiannon or other points?
Leo, can I just add something into that as well? It's Graham here.
Hi, Graham.
And I'm on Rhiannon's thing as well, so we're working together. Just picking up on the act or die, and there's another comment about Chief Exec saying you can't do nothing. Actually, you can do nothing, and nobody will die. Nothing will die, because for a very long time, decades, some places we've worried about, and other places we've just got forgotten about, and you could call them dead, but they haven't gone away. They're still there. And the important thing about that is survival. We can survive, and there's like a sense of panic about where we are now, but we had the same panic last year about the high street before COVID-19 came along. We're not starting from scratch. We're going to just carry on doing something. But I think we need to start looking from the other end of the telescope. We seem to keep zooming in on the high street and the high street economy, but we're not ever talking about places and how we make them places of thrival for all people doing all things. And buying retail, the high street, whatever that might be, is just one component of that. And it's not the most important component of that. The whole thing has to work together. And I think the thing that holds the whole thing together is movement. How we move and how we physically interact all day long. And I think our movement structures have got bent completely out of shape with the car and focusing everything on the car, to the extent we live in Liverpool and we have great road corridors going to the city centre, which is the mecca of retail. It's destroyed all the high streets on the way into there. So which is the more important high street, which is the more important economy to be taken care of or community to be taken care of. So what are the panel?
Thank you very much, Graham. Good point on movement. James, I've been told you're waving your hand. I can now see you waving your hand.
It's okay. I'm James Lundy. I'm presently technical director of urban design at Foresight, but previous to that, and I'm also urban design champion for Geelong in Australia. So I'm crossing the ditch which is what they call the piece of water between New Zealand and Australia. And before that, I was general manager of strategy and regeneration for the rebuild of Christchurch after the earthquakes. We've had quite a few knocks over the past decade, and we started off the new decade with another major knock, which is interesting. But we didn't just lose our high street, we lost pretty much 80% of the buildings within our CBD. And Christchurch is a market town. In British sense, it would be a town. It's 450,000 people, but it's the second largest city in New Zealand. So it's a city and a country town at the same time. Lost all our historic buildings largely, but it gave us the opportunity to reimagine the city with something that we called Share an Idea. So after the earthquake and the trauma of the earthquake, the community was invited into the council chambers to write their ideas and stick them on a giant map, an incredibly giant map of what they would like to see in their new city. Unfortunately, the private sector didn't deliver most of what the community wanted to see. They wanted to see beautiful places. They wanted people living in the city. They didn't want cars. What did we get? We got the roads back. We got the cars back. We got car parking back. But the other part where there was more government control, we created actually quite a beautiful public realm along the river. We have a great place called Hagley Park. We pedestrianised the core. Retail come back, hospitality come back. We've got another challenge that's all going to, we've had a much more dramatic and quick lockdown than the UK, but we're coming out of lockdown quicker as well. But the thing was, we monitored all of that retail before. All that hospitality was struggling before COVID. It's all brand new. Some of them were spending $1 million in fit out. The food was too expensive. What really worked was a group of developers built what was called Riverside, which is actually a large, just like some of the speakers talked about, a large shared space where you can go in and fail quickly at very little cost to yourself. So we got the local food cooperatives setting up market stalls there. We got the people who had the food trucks after the earthquake taking a punt with a small stall, and the developers there supported them through that. They funded them through that. It now was just before the earthquake thriving, so that was one thing. I live in the city centre, and this is another point, picking up some of the points that's important. I think, and I'm hopeful, that we're seeing a reversal of the neoliberal policies that have stymied New Zealand's community for the past sort of 30 years, being replaced by a much more social democratic movement in the present government led by our Prime Minister. So we're seeing much more government intervention, much more money going to be pumped into community and into development. I live in the city centre in Christchurch. We can only walk in our neighbourhoods individually or with somebody in your bubble. The streets have actually, people have been enjoying the streets, they've been enjoying the parks, they've been walking around with no retail. They're enjoying the public spaces, they're enjoying the landscapes, they're enjoying the architecture, they're enjoying embracing it. We are going to have to reinvent it because I don't think offices are going to go back the way they did. I don't think retail will go back the way it did. And we don't think we should allow the cars to go back where they used to. So we should take and embrace the lockdown, take the good parts out of it, the quietness of the city. I've had the best sleeps for the past 5 weeks that I've ever had living in the city centre. No traffic noise, no construction noise. Take the good points. I sympathise. I mean, obviously with accent, you can tell that I'm originally from Scotland. But I feel really sorry for the way that the virus has attacked people in the UK and the medical condition and the health and the deaths. We haven't really had that here, but we will have an acceleration of the change and the destruction of consumerism, I hope, in the form that we developed through the 80s and 90s and 2000s, to a different kind of life where consumerism isn't the king or queen anymore. And it will be a sharing of the city centres, a sharing of space. And I can see a lot of good things coming out of this. The destruction of Westfields, going the way that the other chain stores went, opportunities to reconstruct the large shopping malls into mixed communities. And so I tend to agree with, I can't remember, was it David, the medieval historian? We're seeing a fundamental shift again. And hopefully we get a shift that has got the same power that the move to cars had, but in a different direction. So, and there are lots of lessons from Christchurch, lots of things to do, lots of things not to do. And just last thing, we have actually in the blueprint started to bring, it's not happened, but it's happening now, a lot of the things that moved out of town back into town centre. The stadium, or rugby stadium, or entertainment stadium being built right in the middle of the city, because it brings people in. A large multi-sports complex, which traditionally would have been built outside of the city, being built right in the centre of the city, so that we've got all these competitions happening. So I think there is that. And I think another thing that I've taken out of the speakers, which I think is a great idea, I'm going to take it back into Christchurch, is let's take our ivory tower or our castle, which has got something like over 1,000 staff in it, right on the edge of the city centre, split it up and put it into all our small failing neighbourhood centres. Go back to the old days when I was in Scotland, where I was the local planner in Maryhill, in a district in Scotland, walked around at lunchtime, knew everybody and what was happening there, and I didn't need an application to come in to know that somebody was doing something illegal, because I was like the beat cop. And so if we go back to local government in the local high street with staff there, we can start to enliven it.
Thank you very much, James. All interesting ideas. Very envious of you in New Zealand, coming out of your lockdown with less corona, as I sit here in Zone 2 in London with it all around us. Okay, do any of our speakers want to come back on any of those points? We're going to be drawing to a close in like kind of 10 or 15 minutes. Just reading through the chat, some key themes have come out. There's a lot of talk of movement. Some people suggesting that people will be getting in their cars more and more to go to the high street. They'll want to be enclosed after COVID, away from people. Other people saying the rise of cycling has been massive during COVID. What are the implications for high streets? And there's also a point that I raised at the beginning and that I think David mentioned, which is what about bringing some other things back to the high street, like stuff that used to happen there, like workshops or manufacturing and things like that, which I think we haven't really kind of discussed at all. So I've had Mark waving at me for a bit. I'm going to go to Mark, and then I'd like anybody to chip in on those points for kind of the last 15 minutes, and I'll try and get around to anybody else who's got questions. And don't forget, we can have more informal discussion after I've made a couple of announcements in 15 minutes time. So Mark, you had a point.
Yeah, the point I wanted to make, actually, just going off piece slightly, was also we haven't really talked about the internet, the sort of digital and virtual economy, but it's kind of interesting, this kind of yin and yang between, like when Spotify really sort of came into force, it actually had the effect of there being more live music, more festivals, more events, as people who were streaming free music suddenly wanted to go and see the stuff. Interesting, even before this, Nike was doing things like a sort of black box idea where you went to experience sports-related activity, films, filmmaking, and so on. And their idea was about brand loyalty, which we saw with Apple stores and we're seeing with others now. And so the other thing I think we can look at is the relationship between the sort of virtual economy and the economy on the ground, small-scale, intimate, customer-facing spaces. So I think we're going to see a lot more experimental ideas coming through as well.
Thank you very much, Mark. Do we have anybody else with a question or a comment? Ideally, someone who hasn't spoken yet. Is there anybody out there in cyberspace? Malcolm, I can see waving a finger at me. Malcolm, yes, let's hear from you.
Before the value of art and encouraging people to come into town centres. And in many cases, it's been in terms of your pop-up shops on a short-term basis. But really, artists, if you're going to actually, set up and invest in an art studio, you really need some security of tenure. And I think this could be a great asset if we could have some way of subsidising art spaces and giving artists a chance to develop their work, and then encouraging people in and obviously training and teaching evening classes and so on. And how could that be subsidised? I mean, is it only the council that could do that, or are there other means we could encourage? Maybe the big museums could contribute to this. They've got a lot of money. Any thoughts on that from the speakers?
Speakers, do you want to wave a hand at me? Does anybody want to come back on that?
Well, I'm sorry, I'll just pop in again, if that's okay.
Please.
Yeah, I guess from Future Cities' point of view, we're essentially an arts consultancy, and most of our ideas reflect the arts. I mean, I think the role of artists and creatives in this is massive, but very much as not just art for art's sake, but as really part of the thinking. I mean, this is not really a perfect example, but we worked recently in Greenwich, and we managed to get hold of the landscape budget instead of the landscape design, and we ended up with an elevated 5-kilometre running track, which came out of a different budget. So I've always seen the opportunity for artists to have a much more sort of front of house creative role, and not something that's added on as a kind of piecemeal thing at the end, which is what normally happens. So, I think difficult times need creative solutions, and that means we are in a creative economy in Britain, and we have the most extraordinary artists, designers, and so on. So a bigger role for them, but where they can actually do something. That would be my issue.
Thanks, Mark. I've got a few people who are putting on the chat various points. Let's see if they're going to be bold enough to come forward. Catherine has said that she wanted to get in with a question. Catherine, are you there? No, we're giving you your chance, Catherine. I've also got quite a few other points from various people. I'm going to just say their names, and if they'd like to say their question rather than me summarising it for you, I think that would be better. A few points have been made by Sarah Chubb from Greater Cambridge Planning. Are you there, Sarah? No, not doing very well on this, are we? People are happy to put things on the chat and then they seem to disappear. What about Simon Pugh? Are you there, Simon? Oh, not doing well at all here. How about Stella Jackson? No, I think I'm going to give up on the chat.
I saw Tim Ferro wanting to say something earlier.
Oh, Tim, let's come to you, Tim.
Okay. Yes, if I could just contribute something, maybe in the form of a question. But we haven't really heard much about the role of accessibility in town centres in this discussion. We've heard about movement a bit, but the fact is that centres, town centres, high streets, are always in places which are, the most accessible. Whatever form of transport is being used in the particular age in which it's developed. And currently, in the past century and so on, we've had public transport as the mainstay of accessibility for the high street and city town centres. I think a lot of people are reflecting on this and thinking, at the moment we have a sort of counter trend because of the virus emergency, and people are afraid to travel on public transport and are thinking about different ways of meeting their needs. So a trend that was already there for online shopping and home working has been accelerated, of course, And a big question is whether people want to go back from that. So whilst we've had tremendous forces over the past couple of decades in particular, a reversal of the decline of city centres and town centres, people wanting to live there, modern flats and so on, sort of an agglomeration effect. We're now perhaps going to witness a counter trend of shopping local, shopping online, working at home, relying on local services and so on in the suburbs and so on, rather than using a mode of transport which might be feared, public transport, buses and trains and so on. I just wondered if anybody had a response on that point.
Anybody on our panel want to come back to that? And now Catherine and Sarah have put on their cameras and are there for their...
Just on Tim's point. Hello?
Hi, David. Yeah, you go for it.
Well, I think partly connected to Tim's point and what other people have said, the future that we're going to see as people are less inclined, at least for a year or so or more, to use public transport and to enjoy home working and going locally, it really is very much for local and central government will have a big part in deciding to whom our streets are allocated. And they will decide whether that road space is going to be used by cars or by people walking and cycling. And this is the very big decision that they're having to make at present. I see in London, sort of inner London, with Labour authorities, there's quite a move to start helping pedestrians and cyclists. It may well be very different elsewhere.
Thank you, David. Right, I think we've got Sarah with us now. Sarah, did you have a question or a point?
Well, it was just because you were asking me to speak earlier and I was having problems. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, hear you fine. You
okay, fine, great.
I saw your name on it, so I thought.
Yeah. It was just to pick up all the great points that people were saying about how to bring people and footfall back to the high street. I think the challenge for us as a local planning authority is working with the county. So when we're trying to encourage change in the high street or areas of the city, the local highway authority has a great deal of ownership of those spaces. And at the moment, a lot of their priority, whilst they're trying to encourage a modal shift to cycling and walking, is about public transport. And there's this tension between movement and place that we're trying to deal with. So it's a challenge for us. We want change. We want to encourage change, but trying to get highway engineers on the same page is not always that easy.
Anybody got an experience on how to get highway engineers on their side? Please let us all know, frankly.
Could I raise a point, Leo?
Sorry, who have we got there? Is it Catherine?
Yes.
Hi, Catherine. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Catherine Graham Harrison, broad interest in urban regeneration from way back, now retired. I think the point is we didn't define at the beginning what we meant by high street. And in a lot of contexts, I'm a North Londoner, the high street, Camden, Kilburn, Kentish Town, they're all sort of high streets, struggling in different extents. They're within walking distance for huge numbers of people. And in smaller places, some of the places to which David was referring, for example, not for everybody. Of course, all our places have expanded and some people are very transport dependent. But I think a very significant number are learning, and I've had this, coming from a number of friends and contacts, they're learning to walk much more and realizing that X, Y, or Z is only 10 minutes away, and isn't it good to do it walking? So I think the sort of sense of what we define as the high street and what we're trying to revive could be applied not just to places that people pile into from 5 miles away in major city shopping centres, as it were, but a lot of more local places. And I think if one of the things that follows from COVID is more of a focus on local and closer to home, many of us live in places where regeneration of those places, which are completely accessible on foot or bicycle for everybody who has any mobility, would be extremely welcome. So I don't think we're just talking about places that have to be accessed by public transport.
Leo, can I come in to pick up to agree with Catherine and indeed with David as well, and to bring in some of the very basic psychology, which of course everybody will know, which is about cognitive maps. So if we think about how we navigate our places, we are pretty limited in terms of it being local, and how we can manipulate our understanding of our local area. And so when we think of how we organised our places historically, which is what David was telling us about, it was drawing on those very basic skills that we have that help us to navigate in a meaningful way. And when we do that and we localise things in a much more natural, psychologically defined way, so you also enable a building of a local community, because as you walk through those places, there's no need to drive after all. So you'll begin to meet your neighbours more. You'll begin to strike up conversations with dog owners if you happen to have a dog, or with your local greengrocer. So all these things will happen much more naturally if we're relying on our sense of cognitive map, which we shortcut now by talking about community or neighbourhood. I think that's really interesting and quite a powerful way of bringing in the different disciplines that need to start to talk to each other for us to get this right.
Thank you, Rhiannon. We've got time just for probably one more question, and then I've got a couple of announcements. We're obviously going to thank all of our speakers. Do we have one more point or question from somebody out there in cyberspace? Lots of people have got their cameras off. I'm just panning through you all. Okay, I've got David Radlin, who's raising his hand. David, you get the kind of last word.
Okay. I was interested in picking up the point that's been going on the chat room about how we do this. I think we all know what sort of high street we want to provide, but there's quite a split in terms of the discussion about how we go about doing that. I mean, there's one sort of set of arguments about, well, we should CPO the whole thing, we should take it into ownership, because basically we need to be like a shopping centre owner and control things. Now, the fate of Intune, which is probably likely to disappear at some point this year, is probably not the best sort of indicator that taking it all into single ownership is the right way. My approach is always about allowing it to evolve, to look at the things that are stopping a high street to evolving, because it always needs to evolve. If we get the perfect high street today, it will be the wrong high street for next year, because evolution takes place all the time. So what are the conditions that we need to put in place to make this happen, and how? What are the levers that we can pull to make change happen?
Thank you very much, David. Right, I'm going to begin to draw things to a close now. And make a couple of announcements. Before I make these announcements about the Urban Design Group, I want to thank all of our speakers today. So that's Mark Davey from Future Cities. That's Neil Bennett. Thank you very much, Neil, from Farris. David Harrison from London Living Streets. And of course, Steve Norris from Lambert Smith Hampton. So well done, speakers. Thank you very, very much. Got a couple of announcements to make. So I'm just going to pan over to my third screen. So yeah, we've got an announcement to make, the Urban Design Group, for the Urban Design Group Student Book Awards. Now, Jacqueline, did you say that you had a slide for this?
I do, Leo, but it's got the winner on it, so you might want to announce it first.
Oh, right, we need a drum roll and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go through it. So drum roll. Firstly, just to kind of pressy that, so today's normally the day that we would announce the student winner of the National Urban Design Awards for 2020. Clearly, it would have been much better to do this how we normally do, which is in a big room or restaurant or a bar, like we did last year in Spitalfields. We've all got a drink in our hands, but here we are in cyberspace, lockdown, so this is the best we can do, unfortunately. What I would say is that we are hoping to have our National Urban Design Group conference, our standing conference that we have every year, in September, so we can raise a proper glass to the book award and student award winner then. But for now, we're gonna have to do it. We're gonna have to do it here, and I'm gonna have to do it from this room at the top of my house in Stoke Newington. So let's have a read through for this kind of full drum roll thing. Let's start with the student awards. So we had some excellent entries. I think some of our students might be out there listening right now. We had A Sustainable Vision for Wandle Valley by Consuelo Morales. We had Mina Casa Nosso Barrio by Johanna Fenning. Then we had a group project. I think this must be a Bartlett School of Planning one, which I teach on. This is Poplar, which has been our site for some time. And we have 5 students on that. And then we had another single project called Transforming Together by Omri Ben Chetret. So I can announce that the winner is Consuelo Morales, A Sustainable Vision for Wandle Valley. So, Consuelo, if you're out there, big up to you. Well done. Let's have a proper round of applause. So wonderful. Consuelo will be in touch with you, and we look forward to seeing you at the conference, hopefully happening in September in Sheffield. So that's the first of our 2 awards. Our second award is our book award. I was told by our panel, again, some wonderful urban design books and urbanism books which have come out within the last year. We have Climax City by David Rudlin, who we've just heard from, with Shitri Hamani, that's Reba Publishing. We also had Walkable City Rules by Jeff Speck from Island Press. We then had the third of 4, Urban Lighting for People, Navaz Devwaldian, Reba Publishing again, and then finally we had Building in Arcadia by Ruth Reed, and is also Reba Publishing. So drum roll. The winner is Climax City by David Rudlin and Shitri Hamani. So well done, David, and let's have a quick word from you as you're on the call, if you're still there.
Yeah, I am. Thank you. That's brilliant. I just managed to mute my thing. Also from Shruti. Shruti's based in Jaipur in India, and the book came out of a conversation between myself and Shruti, who used to work for Urbed. That's how we know each other, about how drawing cities can actually understand how they work. So fantastic. We're really grateful for the Urban Design Group and the panel for choosing us, and also great for all the other books. I know a couple of them, and they're also fantastic competitions. So congratulations to the authors as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Right, last bit from me before we can go into any kind of informal discussion on High Street or anything else, frankly, you want to talk about. Tomorrow night, we are launching our ideas space. So this is building on the earlier webinar discussing town, cities and urban design after COVID-19 that some of you, certainly I tuned in last week to Roger Evans's thought piece, New Lives, New Values. So our new Thursday night forum is open to everyone who wants to formulate how we should act now to overcome the current crisis and prepare ourselves for the next one. Exclamation mark. So tomorrow night's session focuses on retail and workplace. Will be hosted by our very own Paul Reynolds, who's out there and on this webinar right now. We'll send out links to the Ticket in Urban update tomorrow, but suggest this stuff has been just selling out so quickly, and there's a limit, unfortunately, as to how many people we can have on the webinar. So if you want to make sure that you get one for tomorrow evening, you can go on the events page on the Urban Design Group website right now to get your ticket, should you want to do that. So I think I'm just going to thank our speakers and all of you out there in the webinar Urban Design Cyberspace, and look forward to seeing you all soon.